Sarah stood in the small yard of her family's ranch, her hands covered in dirt as she worked the land. The sun was beginning to set, casting an orange glow across the hills. The quiet of the desert afternoon was broken only by the occasional chirp of crickets and the soft wind rustling through the trees. She wiped the sweat from her brow, looking over at her son, Billy, who was playing with the few toys they had left. It had been a tough year for Sarah, ever since her husband passed away. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her, and every day was a challenge just to keep things going. Sarah's husband, Frank, had been a good man, but he had died unexpectedly, leaving her with a ranch that was struggling to survive. The land was old and the crops were sparse. She'd never been one to give up easily, but the constant pressure of keeping the ranch afloat while raising Billy on her own had worn her thin. Every day she fought not just for the ranch, but for a future that seemed more uncertain with every passing moment. As she worked, her thoughts wandered to the recent letters she had been receiving from a land baron named Silas Ford. The letters were full of promises of a large sum of money if she agreed to sell the land. But Sarah wasn't interested in money. This ranch was all she had left of Frank. It was her home, and she wasn't going to let it slip away. She had refused Ford's offer each time, but something told her this wasn't the last time she'd hear from him. Her thoughts were interrupted when she heard the sound of hooves in the distance. At first it was just a faint noise, but soon it grew louder, closer. Sarah glanced over her shoulder toward the sound. She couldn't see much in the distance yet, but she instinctively knew it wasn't just anyone riding up to her place. It was too late in the day for anyone to be out here, and the sound of the hooves was steady, deliberate. Billy didn't seem to notice, too caught up in his own little world. Sarah's heart began to beat a little faster. She wiped her hands on her apron and stood up straight, peering into the distance. Her eyes narrowed as a figure on horseback appeared on the horizon. The rider was tall, and his silhouette was dark against the setting sun. As the rider drew closer, Sarah could see that he was a cowboy, dressed in the worn clothes of a man who had seen his fair share of hard days. He rode confidently, his posture straight, his eyes hidden beneath the brim of his hat. Sarah's instincts told her this wasn't a friendly visit. She had seen enough men like him before, men who came with offers of land deals, threats, or even violence. The look in his eyes as he approached made her feel uneasy. Billy, still oblivious to the situation, skipped around, humming to himself. Sarah's hand instinctively went to the small rifle by her side. It was the one thing that gave her a sense of security out here. But she knew it wouldn't do much if this cowboy had bad intentions. As the rider came closer, she took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. There was no reason to jump to conclusions. He could be just passing through after all. But as the cowboy reached the fence near the yard, he slowed his horse and dismounted with a steady, practiced grace. Sarah instinctively stepped forward, her voice firm.
"Can I help you?"
she asked, keeping her eyes locked on him. The cowboy looked at her for a moment, then glanced at Billy, who was still playing by himself, completely unaware of the danger. The cowboy's gaze hardened, and Sarah could see the faintest hint of something cold in his eyes. He turned his focus back to her, his voice low and even. "I'm here to talk," he said. "Your name's Sarah, right?" "That's right," she replied cautiously, still not trusting him. "What's this about?" He stepped closer, his boots crunching softly against the dry earth. "I work for a man named Silas Ford. He's got an offer for you." "I told your boss I'm not selling," Sarah said quickly, her tone firm. She wasn't about to back down, no matter how intimidating this man seemed. The cowboy's lips curled into a faint smirk, but there was nothing friendly about it. "Ford doesn't take no for an answer," he said. "He'll get what he wants, but maybe you'll see things his way if you listen to me." "Listen to you?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "You think I'll just sell everything because some stranger tells me to?" The cowboy took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "Don't scream, don't run, and your boy will be safe," he said, his voice cold and calm as if he had said these words many times before. His gaze flicked briefly to Billy, who was still playing with his toy, completely unaware of the conversation taking place just a few feet away. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She could feel the tension rising in the air, thick and suffocating. This was no simple negotiation. This was a threat. The cowboy was not here to make peace or offer help. He was here to force her hand, to intimidate her into doing what she didn't want to do. Her hand tightened around the rifle, but she didn't raise it. She wasn't sure what she could do, but she wasn't about to back down. She would protect Billy at all costs. "You don't scare me," she said, her voice trembling slightly but still full of defiance. The cowboy's expression remained unreadable. He took another step closer, closing the distance between them. "You should be scared," he said. "Your boy's safety depends on what you decide next." Billy looked up at the cowboy then, his innocent eyes curious but unaware of the danger looming over them. "Mama, who's that?" he asked, his voice light and carefree. Sarah's heart clenched. She had to keep Billy safe, but she couldn't let fear control her. "Stay away from him, Billy," she said, her voice steady despite the fear rising inside her. The cowboy studied her for a moment, then shifted his weight, taking a few steps back. "You don't get to decide what happens next, Sarah," he said, his voice sharp. "Ford does, and I'm here to make sure you know that." He turned, walking back to his horse, and mounted it smoothly. As he rode away, he glanced over his shoulder at Sarah, his expression unreadable. "Think about it," he called, his voice carrying on the wind. "Your choice will determine what happens next." Sarah stood frozen in the yard, watching him disappear into the distance. Her mind raced, her heart pounded. What had just happened? Who was this man, and why had he come? Billy ran over to her, tugging at her sleeve. "Mama, who was that?" "Just someone I'm not sure about," she said softly, pulling him close. "But don't worry, we're safe for now." But Sarah knew the cowboy's warning wasn't just idle talk. Something was coming, and she had to be ready for it. The night after the cowboy left, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She lay awake in her small bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind spinning with the conversation she had just had. Her thoughts kept returning to his cold words. "Your boy's safety depends on what you decide next." It was a threat. She knew that much. But who was he really working for, and why was this happening to her? She glanced over at Billy, who was fast asleep in his little bed by the window. His face was peaceful, free from worry. She couldn't bear the thought of anything happening to him. As a mother, her only goal was to protect him, no matter the cost. But Sarah also knew that the land meant everything to her. It was all she had left of Frank. Selling it, giving it up, would mean losing the only connection she had left to the man she loved. The following morning, Sarah woke with the same unease in her chest. She had no choice but to prepare for whatever was coming next. She couldn't wait for the cowboy to return or for Ford's men to show up at her door. Sarah had to take action. She spent the day securing the house, making sure the doors were locked and the windows were covered. She knew this wasn't enough to keep the trouble away, but it was all she could do for now. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the cowboy's words, but she couldn't make sense of them. What did Ford want with her land? Was it really worth all this? And if so, why hadn't they just made a better offer? Billy spent the day outside, running around the yard as usual, not understanding the tension that hung in the air. Sarah tried her best to act normal, to shield him from the danger that was slowly creeping closer. She couldn't let him see her fear, but deep down she was scared. She had no idea what the cowboy would do next or what Ford's men might be planning. Later that afternoon, Sarah heard the sound of hooves again. This time it was closer, much closer. Her heart skipped a beat. She went to the window and peeked through the curtains, hoping it was someone she could trust. But when she saw the cowboy's familiar silhouette riding toward her, she knew it was trouble. Her pulse quickened. Billy was still outside, playing near the shed, completely unaware of the danger approaching. She rushed out to the yard, trying to stay calm, but her nerves were getting the best of her. The cowboy dismounted from his horse and walked toward her, his boots crunching in the dry grass. His eyes met hers, cold and unfeeling. "Sarah," he said, his voice flat, "I gave you a warning." Sarah stood her ground. "I told you I'm not selling my land." He shook his head slightly, his lips curling into a small, humorless smile. "You still don't understand, do you? Ford doesn't care what you want. This isn't about negotiation anymore." He paused for a moment, and Sarah could feel the weight of his words. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice steady, though she could feel the fear creeping up her throat. The cowboy looked past her, his gaze falling on Billy, who was now standing near the shed, watching them curiously. "It's not about you, Sarah," he said, his voice almost regretful. "It's about the boy." Sarah's stomach twisted. She felt her pulse in her ears. "Leave him out of this," she snapped, stepping forward to block his view of Billy. "You want my land? Fine, take it, but don't touch my son." The cowboy's eyes softened for just a moment as if he were contemplating something, but his expression hardened again just as quickly. "You don't get it," he said. "This is bigger than your land. Ford's not going to stop until he gets what he wants." Sarah's heart sank as she realized what he was implying. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling now. The cowboy stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Ford's men are already on their way. He'll stop at nothing to take the land, and if you don't give it to him willingly, he'll find another way." A cold shiver ran down Sarah's spine. The cowboy wasn't just a messenger. He was a part of something much bigger than she had ever imagined, and now she was in the middle of it. For a long moment there was silence between them. Sarah could feel the weight of his words pressing down on her. Her mind raced, her heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't sell her land, not now, not after everything, but the threat to Billy's safety was too much to ignore. Billy walked up to her, tugging on her sleeve. "Mama, who's that man?" he asked innocently, his wide eyes filled with curiosity. Sarah knelt down and smiled at him, trying her best to appear calm. "He's just a man passing through, sweetheart," she said, brushing his hair out of his eyes. "You go inside and finish your game, okay?" Billy nodded, but before he could turn to go inside, he looked up at the cowboy and asked, "Are you a bad guy?" The question hit Sarah like a punch in the gut. She didn't want Billy to grow up with this kind of fear. She wanted him to know safety and comfort, not threats and danger. She stood up, turning back to the cowboy, her eyes filled with determination. "Get off my land," she said firmly. "You and your boss can't scare me." The cowboy studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. He looked as if he were about to say something, but then he simply shook his head. "You'll regret this, Sarah. It's not over." Without another word, he turned and mounted his horse. He looked back once more, but this time there was a hint of something else in his eyes, something that almost resembled sympathy. And then he was gone, riding off into the distance, leaving Sarah standing there, her heart heavy with uncertainty. As the cowboy disappeared from view, Sarah's resolve hardened. She couldn't let fear control her. She couldn't let Ford win no matter what it took. She would protect Billy no matter the cost. But as the sun began to set, Sarah knew that the worst was yet to come. The cowboy's warning echoed in her mind. It's not over. And deep down, she feared the next time they crossed paths would be far worse than anything she had ever imagined. As she turned to go inside, Billy's hand found hers and she squeezed it gently. She couldn't let her son see the fear in her eyes. Not yet. She had to be strong for him, for herself, and no matter what happened next, she would fight to the end.